My golden child sister becomes disabled after a near-death experience, and my parents shift their attention to me. The sun was setting over the quiet suburban neighborhood, casting a golden glow over the perfectly manicured lawns. Inside the Thompson household, dinner was being served. The aroma of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filled the air, but the tension at the table was palpable. "Emily, pass the salt, please," Mr. Thompson said, his voice calm but firm. Emily, the eldest at 17, rolled her eyes but complied. She was used to being the center of attention, the golden child. Her younger sibling, me, 15, sat quietly pushing food around the plate. I was used to being overlooked. "Emily, your teacher called today," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice tinged with pride. "She said you aced your math test." Again, Emily smirked, glancing at me. "Well, it's not that hard," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I clenched my fork, my knuckles turning white. I hated how everything always revolved around Emily. She was perfect straight A's, captain of the soccer team, and our parents' pride and joy. Meanwhile, I struggled to keep up. I was more into art and music, things my parents didn't seem to value. "Derek, how was school today?" Mrs. Thompson asked, almost as an afterthought. "Fine," I muttered, not looking up from my plate. "Just fine." Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "You know, Derek, you could learn a thing or two from your sister. She's always striving for excellence." My face burned. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I was trying, that I was good at things too, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Emily was the favorite, and nothing I did would ever change that. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Emily was rushing out the door, her soccer bag slung over her shoulder. "I'm late for practice," she called over her shoulder. "Be careful," Mrs. Thompson shouted after her, but Emily was already gone. I watched from the window as Emily sped off in her car. I felt a pang of jealousy. She had everything: freedom, popularity, our parents' admiration. I turned back to my sketchpad, trying to lose myself in my drawings. An hour later, the phone rang. I picked it up, my heart sinking as I heard the panicked voice on the other end. "Derek, it's Coach Miller. There's been an accident. Emily's been hurt. She's on her way to the hospital." My hands trembled as I relayed the news to my parents. The next few hours were a blur. They rushed to the hospital, their minds racing with fear and uncertainty. When they arrived, the doctor's expression was grim. "Emily was in a car accident. She's stable, but she's sustained a spinal injury. It's too early to tell, but there's a chance she may never walk again." Mrs. Thompson gasped, clutching her husband's arm. I felt a mix of emotions: fear, sadness, but also a strange, guilty relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being compared to Emily. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of hospital visits, therapy sessions, and emotional breakdowns. Emily was confined to a wheelchair, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by the reality of her new life. The Thompsons' home, once filled with laughter and pride, now felt heavy with tension. Mrs. Thompson spent hours by Emily's side, trying to coax a smile from her daughter. Mr. Thompson buried himself in work, avoiding the painful reality at home. I, meanwhile, found myself in an unfamiliar position. For the first time, my parents were paying attention to me. They asked about my day, my art, my music. It was strange, almost unsettling. "Derek, how was school today?" Mrs. Thompson asked one evening, her voice softer than usual. "It was okay," I replied, unsure of how to handle the sudden interest. "That's good," she said, forcing a smile. "You know, we're proud of you, Derek. You've been so strong through all of this." I nodded, but inside I felt a pang of guilt. I didn't want their attention like this. I didn't want Emily to be hurt, but at the same time I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. For once, I wasn't the one being overlooked. As the months passed, the dynamic in the Thompson household continued to shift. Emily, once the center of attention, now felt like a burden. She struggled with her new reality, her frustration often boiling over into anger. "Why can't I just be normal again?" she screamed one evening, throwing a book across the room. "Emily, please," Mrs. Thompson pleaded, tears in her eyes. "We're doing everything we can to help you, but it's not enough," Emily cried, her voice breaking. "I hate this. I hate being stuck in this chair." I watched from the doorway, my heart aching for my sister. I wanted to help her, to make her feel better, but I didn't know how. And part of me was still angry that she had always been the favorite. Angry that she had taken our parents' attention for granted. "Derica," Emily said, her voice softer now. "Do you hate me too?" I was taken aback. "No, Emily. I don't hate you. I don't know how to help you." Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know how to help myself either." One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the tension in the room was thicker than ever. Emily pushed her food around her plate, her appetite long gone. I glanced at her, then at my parents, who were quietly eating. "Derek," Mr. Thompson said suddenly, breaking the silence. "We've been thinking, maybe it's time for you to take on more responsibilities around the house. You're almost 16, after all." I frowned. "What kind of responsibilities?" "Well, for starters, you could help Emily with her therapy exercises," Mrs. Thompson suggested, "and maybe take over some of the chores she used to do." My heart sank. I didn't want to be Emily's caretaker. I didn't want to be the one picking up the pieces of her life, but I also knew I couldn't say no. "Okay," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and guilt. "Thanks, Derek," she said softly. I nodded, but inside I felt a storm of emotions. I was angry, resentful, but also hopeful. Maybe this was my chance to finally be seen, to finally matter. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself growing closer to Emily. We spent hours together, working on her therapy exercises, talking, even laughing. For the first time in our lives, we were truly connecting. One afternoon, as we sat in the backyard, Emily turned to me. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. I looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," Emily said, her voice trembling. "For always being the favorite, for taking you for granted. I never realized how much it hurt you." I felt a lump in my throat. I had waited so long to hear those words, but now that they were here, I didn't know how to respond. "It's okay," I said finally, my voice shaky. "I'm just glad we're talking now." Emily smiled, tears in her eyes. "Me too." The Thompsons' home slowly began to heal. Emily, though still in a wheelchair, was finding new ways to live her life. I, once the overlooked sibling, was now an integral part of the family. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the atmosphere was lighter than it had been in months. Emily cracked a joke, and for the first time in a long time the whole family laughed. "Derek," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with pride, "we're so proud of you. You've really stepped up." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. Just when things seemed to be settling into a new normal, an unexpected twist shook the Thompson family once again. Emily had been secretly attending physical therapy sessions outside of the home, determined to regain her ability to walk. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Emily stood up from her wheelchair. The room fell silent as she took a tentative step forward, then another. "Emily," Mrs. Thompson gasped, tears streaming down her face. "I've been working on this for months," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "I'm not giving up." I felt a surge of pride for my sister. She had always been strong, but now she was proving just how resilient she could be. As Emily continued to make progress, the Thompson family found a new balance. Emily was no longer the golden child, and I was no longer the overlooked sibling. We were equals, each with our own strengths and weaknesses. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For being there for me," Emily replied. "For not giving up on me." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I had never known before. "I'll always be here for you, Emily." The Thompson family had been through hell and back, but they had come out stronger on the other side. Emily was walking again, though with a slight limp, and I had found my place in the family. As we sat down for dinner one evening, the atmosphere was filled with love and laughter. The favoritism that had once divided us was gone, replaced by a deep sense of unity. "Derek," Mr. Thompson said, raising his glass, "to you, for being the glue that held this family together." I felt a lump in my throat as I raised my glass. "To family," I said, my voice filled with emotion. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt like I was part of one. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more interesting stories happening around you.